Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session of the forum. Please let me know if you can hear me. My name is Deborah Amuwo. I am talking to you from Dakar, Senegal. I'm a journalist as well as a head of partnerships at West Africa Democracy Radio, a bilingual radio station based in Dakar. And I'm so excited for this discussion and this platform. A big thank you to Share Africa for bringing me on board for this event. So this session is a panel discussion and it's going to be an interactive one. We'll be talking about African urbanization. Now we have three panelists in this session. They'll be talking to us surrounding the theme of the dynamics of African urbanization with a focus on new models. So by 2035, every second person on the continent is likely to be living in a town or a city. And that means that the continent will see about 20 million inhabitants in each city. For some of us, I'm Nigerian, so in Nigeria, in Lagos, I know that Lagos is inching closer to 20 million by the day. Right now, as of 2020, Lagos had over 14 million inhabitants. So this is very real, and it is the reality of most of our cities. It will be in the next few years. So urbanization is occurring at a rate that is very unprecedented. And with urbanization also comes a consequence, which is climate change. And that's what has basically inspired this conversation that we're having today. We have three architects from diverse backgrounds. And there's something unique about each architect that we're talking to today. They have a wealth of experience in thinking and creating appropriate and sustainable urban management models. And I'm really excited to hear what they have to say about, the new Africa that we can make when it comes to architecture and especially sustainable architecture. And within the next hour, we hope to take a look at how urbanization on the continent will take into account or could take into account population growth as well as climate change. We'll also discuss some of the new models of urbanization, some of which the architects we're talking to today have already worked with and have thought about and have prototypes of, and then how these new models can be a catalyst for true transformation on the continent. And before I introduce our panelists, I do want to tell them that, I'm not a specialist in architecture, but I am trying my best to understand the different terms. So please do make it as simple as you can for people like me, especially me, number one, me, so that I can grasp the different concepts. And of course, for people that are watching, that are listening, that are not familiar with certain things, just try to break it down for us as much as you can, and we'll try to follow through. Okay, so we have with us Mami Tal, who is an architect. She presently works at the international firm Wilmot and Associates. Hi, Mami. And
Hi.
I believe you're in Dakar right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So we could literally be hanging out, but we're not.
Yeah.
Well, good to have you. Wilmot and Associates designed the United Nations headquarters in Senegal. That's where she works. Mami studied architecture in Montreal, Canada, and then returned home, like many of us do, to practice at the Agence de Gestion du Patrimoine Bâti de l'État, which is the agency for the management of the state-built heritage sites. And she worked there for 2 years. Now, she's also a co-founder of Lives, which is a platform that promotes African destinations and their cultural ecosystem. And she's also a photographer, videographer. She likes to communicate her vision and her personal creative world through these two outlets. And then she aims to use her work as a vehicle to challenge existing limitations in the development of the city, and of course to encourage innovation and put the arts at the forefront. Mami, of course, we'll be hearing more from you and what inspires you and how you hope to include your passion in building Africa and building Africa's cities.
Thank you.
And Mami studied in Montreal, Canada. We have Aziza Shaoni, who I believe is in Canada at the moment.
No,
Okay.
in Morocco.
Oh, well, she's in Morocco.
Fez, Morocco.
Fez, Morocco, where she's from. And we're glad to have you with us. Aziza is not just an architect, she is also an associate professor of architecture at the University of Toronto. And she's the founding principal of the design practice Aziza Shaoni Projects. She's also the director of the Designing Ecological Tourism Research Platform at the Daniels Faculty. And we're so glad to have her with us to share about what she teaches on most of the time, which is sustainable design and construction in the developing world. And she's also very interested in architecture and landscape, particularly through implementation of sustainable technologies in arid climates. Aziza is not only an architect, she's also an author and a teacher, as I mentioned. So she's written or edited 3 books. She has also rehabilitated several heritage buildings. And I believe you are mostly well known for what you've done in Fez and with the Fez River. And it's amazing that you're talking to us from there today. I think that's a beautiful coincidence. So thank you so much for joining us. And of course, she's done much more work all across the Middle East and in Europe, as well as in her country, as we mentioned. And now up next, we have Mr. Kunle Adeyemi, who is an architect, also a professor and development researcher, and his work is recognized worldwide, especially for its innovation and originality. Now, I did mention that Aziza is very passionate about and has done some work with cities on water. Well, Mr. Adeyemi has also done work on cities on water. In fact, he's very obsessed with water and creating cities on water. He was the brain behind the Makoko Floating School, which was a groundbreaking prototype floating structure that was once located in the lagoon in the heart of Lagos, Nigeria. And the Makoko Floating School has since evolved into the Makoko Floating System, which is a simple prefabricated building solution for developments of water. Now, it seems like Mr. Kunle is not with us anymore, but he's the founder of INLE. And what is INLE? It's an architecture, design, and urbanism practice that was founded 11 years ago for innovating cities and communities. Mr. Adeyemi has also done work in Tanzania, in the UK, in New York, and he's currently a visiting professor at UNILAG, the University of Lagos, and has also had various appointments across Harvard, Princeton, Cornell, and Columbia universities, where he leads academic research in architecture. So amazing to have all of you here with us, and let's get right into the conversation. Mr. Adeyemi, I believe, will be joining us very soon. So first of all, I would like to hear from Mami. And Mami, I want us to go into, okay, Kunle is back. Good to have you back. I want us to go into how the continent can effectively combine environmental responsibility and its rapid demographic growth. As I mentioned earlier, our continent, our cities are growing really rapidly. It's seen a lot of migration. So how can we combine environmental responsibility and the rapid demographic growth? Can we combine both? Please go ahead, Mani.
Thank you, Deborah, and hi to Aziza and Kunle. Really nice to meet you. Just to tell you, my English is very, very bad, so I just took notes and I'm gonna read them. So to answer that question, before talking about architecture, I will answer the question in a global way, because the most important things in terms of environmental responsibility is to provide the most basic needs to the communities: electricity, water, and sanitation. And what we observe is that the population is growing faster than electrification can be expanded. And today, in many African countries, environmental responsibility remains a trend. Although it is developing over time, some people still think that it's impossible to live without air conditioning. Solar panels are just still an option for public buildings. Government are creating like smart cities in the way they understand that notion, and building buildings to impress the foreigners and not to answer to the needs of people here. And there's no more green space, no more place in the city for the pedestrian. So I think our challenge today is to plan our cities and build buildings that are adapted and integrated into our historical, social, cultural, spatial, economical, geographical context. An urbanization shaped by our needs and habits, emphasizing social equity, the development of public transportation, and new policies for architecture and urbanization of the city. And we need to change our way of living by using local materials and building with ecological practices. And growth and urban expansion go hand in hand, leading in increased road traffic and poor air quality. So we need to adapt climate smart urban growth pattern through proactive urban planning and the promotion of compact cities instead of the current unlimited urban extension. For example, here in Dakar, people tend to expand their homes as their family grow. It will be wise, I think, to build in anticipation of the extension, which called like incrementalism. It's a term that refers to this ability to build in anticipation, something with in that way, it promotes the vertical development, but in that way too, it doesn't really change the urban landscape. You know, when you anticipate things, when people auto-construct there, it creates a form of anarchy. So it's really important to anticipate this kind of things. But all of this is impossible without strong action from the government and also economic consideration. So yeah, I think this is how the continent can combine environmentality and demographic. And in a good answer, you know, I could go like really in the details, but yeah, this is the situation here in Dakar.
All right, thank you so much, Mami, and
You're welcome.
We'll join Kunle now. Please tell us what you think about combining environmental responsibility and its rapid demographic growth. You're Nigerian and you've lived in different cities across the world. You're very familiar with how fast Lagos's demographic is growing, and also various cities across Nigeria. What are some ways you think that this can be tackled?
Well, thank you very much, Deborah. I think Mami has touched on very important points. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And some of these points are very applicable, you know, throughout the continent. These are some of the challenges that we notice, and these are the challenges that we're dealing with, that we're tackling. I think part of the environmental challenges that we have already you've discussed, Deborah, in your opening statement. I think climate change is a big one, and I think it's something that is still a little bit far from the average person, just in terms of observation. Like, what does that really mean on a day-to-day basis? And how can we contribute to mitigating the impacts, you know, or adapting to the impacts? I think these are some of the questions that linger when we're talking about environmental responsibility. How can an individual tackle this challenge? Not to mention a community or the government itself. In a city like Lagos, of course, you know, with the high population growth, I think infrastructure, if we consider that from part of the environmental or the built environment, is still very lacking. And it's also, for me, an opportunity for us to rethink how the infrastructure should be built to accommodate the growth. And I think we're still following a lot of the old models and models from other parts of the world that are not necessarily suitable for our environment. But there are basic things that still need to be had. Proper roads, infrastructure, transportation, energy, water, sewage management systems. Now, of course, my work in the last 10 years, part of it has focused on looking at specifically a question about the intersection of these challenges of rapid growth in cities and urbanization. And in 2011, when we began doing the research on these two challenges, which we think are some of the most important challenges of our time, it occurred to us that we realized that Africa, of course, has one of the greatest challenges of impacts of climate change as an environment. And the more implication that we see day to day is the increase in rainfalls and flooding, particularly in the coastal cities. There are some impacts on the landlocked and hinterland cities, but primarily where you have largest populations are also impacted by climate change. So to put it in context, of course, that 70%, we realize 70% of all major African cities are capitals, and capitals are by the waterfront. And that triggered us to start to think about this, the idea to sort of look at the conditions that they're dealing with. And we began and founded the African Water City Center, which looked at environmental and rapid urbanization. I think to answer your question specifically, I think the most important responsibility is at an individual scale really is as simple as really just understanding your environment and managing energy consumption. And also and energy consumption management can come in various forms. It comes through how you deploy resources in terms of material, construction. It comes down to transportation. It comes down to waste management. And it also comes down to resources in terms of local materials, as Mami mentioned. So that awareness, I think, the education of understanding the educational part of climate change is still a huge gap on the continent. And I think this then sort of sways into a specific field of work that we have developed, which is water cities. And in water cities, what we've tried to approach is to find is that we were inspired by communities that are already tackling some of these environmental challenges living on water. And we've learned from that community, and we're developing solutions that are for climate change adaptation through buildings, energy systems, waste management systems. So I think awareness is a very big question, is a very big step that we need to understand, that the micro effects of individual activities, choices that we make about how our buildings are built, the materials that we deploy into the construction, and the way we even just plan our cities at a large scale. These all add up to the sort of compound effect of dealing with the challenges of the environment. We don't see them as only challenges. We actually see them sometimes as opportunities. So we're thinking of opportunities of creating new models of cities that adapt to these conditions.
Thank you so much, Kunle. And Aziza, do you want to chip in about that and also tell us a little bit of how to create awareness on a continent where most people are still just trying to get their basic needs met, and their thinking is not how am I going to save my environment necessarily, but how am I going to survive? So just give us your thoughts about this question, and then if you can tap into that dimension as well.
Yeah, sure. I think that before getting into the awareness part, I just wanted to touch upon a few topics that Mami and Kunle we didn't mention. I think what they said was extremely useful and also very applicable to Morocco. I can mainly speak of the context of Morocco, a little bit about Senegal and Sierra Leone, which I know. Just for the little story, my mom is from Senegal. She's from Saint Louis. She was born and raised in Saint Louis. So I am partly from Senegal myself. But one aspect that I find is extremely important regarding environmental responsibility is one of, because in Morocco, what we've been noticing is that environmental, let's say, responsibility just lies in the hand of few developers that are doing high-end projects. And so in Morocco, the center of the cities are getting poorer and poorer, and you have these gated communities that appear in the surrounding of the city, adjacent to very low income and sometimes informal settlements. And so in a sense, the right of an environment that's clean, that's sustainable, it's not a given in Morocco. So there's, I think, a question of equity. And on the other hand, if Morocco, compared to other African, let's say, countries, have just lately put forward certain regulations, mainly for construction and for buildings to have more sustainable buildings. Unfortunately, those regulations, they are in the regulation, but no one is checking on them, or you can still get a building permit without, even if you don't fulfill this regulation. So I think for me, the role, there are two things. There is obviously the awareness of the architects and even the young generation, of architects about their role in the making of the city and of the urban environment. This is not ingrained yet, I find, in Morocco. And on the other side, I think the responsibility lies also in the hands of the government that need to set up a certain list of standards, at least for public projects, so that certain standards about just the meter squares of green spaces. Morocco, like any African cities, severely lacking green spaces. Any old park that was left from the colonial era has been built upon. Unfortunately. So, so the question of equity and also the role of the government is extremely important, but not to just pass regulation, but to enforce this regulation and apply them in its own public project. So now regarding one aspect that Mami mentioned, which I think is super, super relevant, is one of greenwashing, which is that, there are all these big words and forums and seminars about how African cities of the future have to be sustainable and blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry to say, but on the ground, we're not meeting all of these goals. And I think that this greenwashing is an importation from the global north, where it looks good on paper. I mean, from like our side of the world, to get funds from the global north is easier if your project checks all these marks. But unfortunately, on the ground, this is not something that's really applied. Mm-hmm. So this has to do with the education of the architects themselves. They need to believe in that role. The citizens need to understand why this is even for their own well-being, but also for the well-being of the planet. We're still a bit far on that end. And finally, just very quickly, my last point is I'm going to jump up on something that Mami mentioned, which I'm very keen on as well, is that the solutions, even about sustainability, should absolutely not be one that we import from the global north. Our continent is so diverse, and its culture has its own let's say, genius loci. So we have so many things to learn from vernacular architecture without being backward. And also we need to take the typologies that we have in our countries and try to improve them. And this is what I wanted. I don't know if you can see my screen. This is very quickly what I wanted to show you. So can you see my screen at all?
No.
Is my
Yes.
screen shared?
Now we can.
Very good. Yeah. So for example, in Morocco, regarding demographic, the main typology all over Morocco is what we call R+2, which is just a rectangular building with 6 units. And why did this typology has grown? Because the government back in the 2000 wanted to in a way, answer the needs for housing, which was really lacking, couldn't build enough social housing. So it gave a tax breaks to it gave a tax break to developers, so they don't pay a 20% tax on construction if they build housing units that can be sold for less than $20,000. And so they came up with this typology, which is the cheapest way to be able to achieve this tax break. But unfortunately, this typology had no ventilation, so they built it as cheaply as possible. So Morocco got suddenly filled with this mushrooming of this, housing type that of very, very poor amenity. So what we did, we convinced the developer to say, with an amount of money, let's try to do something that's where you have cross ventilation. So we developed a ventilation system through the staircase. And we had another light shaft that was also staggering. We did insulation. We were able within the budget to include insulation and also a usable roof. And so the original plan changed from something that had no cross ventilation whatsoever to 2 ventilation shafts in the middle. And the construction cost was actually exactly the same. So yeah, so that was just, kind of the first project that I wanted to share with you as an example of what one can do to improve on existing housing typology. So we need to work with whatever we have and try to improve it.
Interesting. So obviously this is a way to create affordable and still sustainable models based on what already exists.
And with the same amount of money.
Interesting. Of course, especially that part. Okay, we're going to go back to Kunle now and kind of just talk about the competitiveness of African cities and how that can be improved in light of these challenges. So we've highlighted a few challenges. We've highlighted the fact that it's not just about having a plan, but a plan that fits each country and fits our African realities. And as Aziza just mentioned, being affordable and also not just changing what already is there, because the continent cannot afford to, in many countries, revamp the whole structure. So talk to us a little bit about how we can stay competitive, how African cities can stay competitive, and also stay relevant when it comes to architecture and sustainable, of course.
The strategies is really understanding ourselves, understanding the unique characteristics and qualities of the African continent and the different regions of the continent. And as my co-panelists have mentioned in various forms, one of our challenges is that we do not appreciate what we have, our historical backgrounds, our even our natural environment, and we haven't really invested a lot in developing some of these local resources, crafts, technologies, and I think it is still a huge gold mine of knowledge and expertise, and also just potential solutions where we can recognize that each city or each country or each region in the African continent can really look at their own assets and focus on that. So, I mean, every African city cannot be the same. Should not be the same as a Western city or a city in the north, the global north. But recognizing whether you are in a very in a tropical area part of the country or part of the continent, or you are in a desert part of the continent, or you're in or you're at the beachfront, or there are so many diverse environmental conditions which in themselves lend ideas and solutions for how the cities can be developed using those resources. So the challenge is that we really haven't focused on those natural conditions and looked for how we can harness those things. And what people are already doing, what people are doing, the knowledge that exists in these regions. I think when we begin to recognize that and identify, it's almost like cultivating cultivating what's happening, and new species of plants or new species of crops. You look at what's already happening, what's good, what thrives in an area, and you improve on it. So I'm quite glad to see Aziza's work on that. Looks like what may have become vernacular architecture, and finding solutions to improve on it, because a lot of work has gone into people doing something already, which is that, okay, they found the most economical, cheap way to develop housing, but there are still challenges with those things. And she's taking a step further to resolve some of the challenges while and improving conditions. We've done similar things with our projects, which is in Lagos, the Makoko floating system, which is really essentially us looking at a time where we're trying to solve affordable housing and asking what is the cheapest dwelling? How can you solve affordable housing if you don't look for the cheapest dwellings that people are building? And realize this community, Makoko, who build largely on water with no infrastructure, no land, no heavy equipment, no high technology. They're building some of the thousands of homes on water. And if we could learn from them and improve on it and develop a new way of building, maybe we might even have a solution to affordability, and also tackling climate change and its main impact of being on water. So I think there are many opportunities like that across the continent where we can recognize our competitive advantage, that this is what is, sorry about that, that there's something already happening that is indigenous, that is local, that it requires, that it is based on the resources that are available in a particular region, and harnessing those things and improving them, preserving the culture, preserving the heritage of those regions. And that's what people want to come to. They don't want to come to Nigeria because it looks like Dubai. They want to come to Dakar because there's an authenticity about Dakar. So I think we just need to preserve our heritage, our culture, and authenticity in the various regions, and that's a very, very huge step to solve this problem.
Great. And Mami, do you think authenticity is also the way to go? You started in that route talking about using the local equipment, the local resources that we have. But do you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think it's really important. Actually, that's the work we were trying to do, that we are doing with the Lives platform. Today we have Dakar Lives that promote art and culture in Senegal, but also, architecture, urbanization. We use this platform to try to pass our, like, for the messages, you know, we want people to hear, and for also like the way we see the city today, we want people to see it, you know, wherever they are in the world. And as you were saying earlier, managing African cities today is more about solving crises than guiding urban development. And most time and resources are devoted to finding immediate response to urgent needs. So they don't have time, you know, to dream or to think about maybe a potential existence of an architecture, an identity in architecture, you know. And for decades, African cities have been managed with inflexible master plans that regularly fail to take into account the needs of the majority of residents. Because these master plans are based on the control of space and the regulation of its use, they do not address the challenges of African urbanization, as Conley was saying, and characterized in part by informality. And moreover, in this informal settlement, there are many recycling activities like, and I think these activities, yes, last year I was part of a program. It was the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. It was about circular design in London. And I was there for to promote the earth material. And this is where I learned this term of circular economy, which is really like something that can become a new economy here in Africa, you know, and improve the competitiveness. And the circular economy is an economy limiting the waste of resources and environmental impact and increasing efficiency at all stages of the product economy. And people do that here, but they do it because they don't have a choice, because they're poor, you know, because they don't have access to like the middle class, even like the middle class can, like, all the things that the middle class can have access. Excuse me. What I'm trying to say is that this is like a really important aspect of our way of living that we don't take into account, because we deny this reality of informality. And today, African countries cannot develop, most of African countries cannot develop without this reglementation of the informality. And master plans have contributed not only to informality, but also to greater social and spatial marginalization, and perhaps to increased poverty. In African cities, colonial and post-colonial master plans have generally resulted in a planned urban core surrounded by large areas of informal settlements with commercial and residential enclaves developed for the elite. And for example, here, when I talk about the master plan, you know, like they used to have this traditional plan where you have the business center and then you have a residential neighborhood. And when we observe Senegal and other African cities, you realize that it's not a model that is suitable for us. For example, here in Senegal, it's rare to see an exclusively residential neighborhood. It's most cases the owner transform their garage into a store or a hair salon, and then they park their car outside, you know. So it caused then traffic jams, and they steal in the pedestrian space. And when you see that in a large scale, you know that if it was planned on the urbanization in advance, you know, they wouldn't have to do all this transformation in their house. It's not just about a question of renting, you know, and having money. It's also because people need this kind of activities in their community life. You know, they need this local business, and it's really part of our life here. And also, when I was talking about the colonial and the colonial master, I think we have this new generation. We have the duty to try to change the narrative. As I was saying, this is what we're trying to do with Dakar Lives. but also the architects, you know, with the colonial buildings that are already built with ecological gestures, you know. People, it's most of the time it's associated to a negative past. And but today, if you change the narrative, we can maybe promote the rehabilitation, you know, promote the fact that these buildings are part of the history, and maybe try to manage to know today what are these buildings are supposed to be. Because I think the meaning of a building, it also have an impact of the way people see that building. So I think it's really important for us today to have this compartment, and we need more flexible planning and zoning system that allow for urban mixity, as opposed to the monofunctional zoning that master plan typically promote. And this allows for income generating or economic activities in residential areas or other appropriate location. And yeah, sorry, I was talking too much, but yeah, basically this is what
Okay.
I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't say
Aziza.
everything I wanted to say about the colonial buildings, but I will find my words.
I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
And honestly, you're doing good in English. You're doing good. Okay. Aziza, would you like to add anything? And before we move on to the next question, tell us just what you have in mind when it comes to improving the challenges.
I am going to keep it. You to improve the competitiveness, right? So I'm going to keep it super short.
Yes, improve the competitiveness.
Yes, so I'm just going to share with you again, you know, a slide. It's one of our projects. So how do we improve it? Well, for me, I believe that it's through engaging the people. If the people, the users of the city and of our project as designers are engaged in the processes, we're making a city for them. And a lot of the knowledge, like what we mentioned before, is embedded within the local population. They're the one that use the city. They're the one that know what's missing, what can be improved sometimes. And we've done some experiments, for example, in Morocco, in the city of Laayoune, which is a city in the desert where that has a mix of population is first generation or second generation nomad. And their use of public space is very different. The public space in the cities were usually designed by an architect 1,000 kilometers away, air-conditioned office in Rabat, in the capital. And so when we were asked to do a diagnosis on how to improve public spaces, then we developed a collaborative approach where we developed an application, which is a collage application, where we ask people, they have an image of their series of public spaces and to add different objects onto them. But the most important thing, so we did it digitally, and we did it also just using scissors to see if there was, you know, like a difference. But the most important thing is that we asked our clients, which was a foundation and the city, that we just want to engage with the people that in general never have a voice in city council or like in meetings. That is women, that is the children, youth, and also sub-Saharan and this was very, very, we give a voice to these minority groups. I mean, I call them minority because they're not represented whatsoever in urban decision-making in Morocco. And so we were actually amazed by the amount of knowledge and how our cities can improve if we engage people that actually fuse them. And in Sierra Leone, very quickly, just this project that we're doing with the government of education, we're asked to build a typology of sustainable school. And we decided before even to do the design to actually do a series of workshops that engage kids of different ages, using even a board game that we designed because we knew that a school was going to be a school for the blind, so that even blind children could actually use this little model to actually tell us what would be the best organization of outside spaces in this school. So I'm a true believer that the inhabitants teach us a lot.
Okay, thank you, Aziza. That was very brief. I appreciate it. You have in the past also talked about how water can be used differently in order to create new models in urban planning. And of course, Kunle has also worked extensively in that area. But Aziza, will start with you. To what extent can new models of urbanization optimize the commercial and industrial dynamism of Africa specifically?
Sure. So if I will start by saying that we have, we have to change almost have to decolonize our way of thinking, like about cities. I'm completely with Mami that the master plan, the master plan, by the time it's finished and we have advanced, it's already completely obsolete. We need to develop methods that are more incremental and more resilient on one end. Then regarding the model, I'm also like a true believer that we should stop seeing the cities as layers, here are the roads, here is the park, and here are the buildings. But we need to see how they all can work together. And if I may just share my screen, like last time, I think the best way to exemplify this is in a project we worked on, which is in Fez. This was the river that crossed the World Heritage City of Fez, where I'm from, and this is what it had become, an open air sewage. It was covered. And, like in a sense, it was viewed as a sewage. So it was viewed as a piece of infrastructure. And one example how our African cities could benefit from a new way to view urban is to actually think these pieces of infrastructure, they're officials, they're just a piece of sewage that's stinky. But if we actually can clean the water and in a very dense urban fabric, use that piece of infrastructure as a mean to green the city and clean the air and create more public spaces, even the better. And finally, like another way also to look at our cities that was mentioned by Mami is to look at different forms of heritage, not just of ancient heritage, but also 20th century heritage. And in Morocco and in Senegal and on other places, it doesn't just mean French colonial heritage, but also heritage from our independence years that have given rise to these amazing buildings. Like this is like a thermal bath in Morocco that went through many changes over the years. I think one approach before doing anything new in our city would be to start looking at that this abandoned, very often they're abandoned or underused heritage from the 60s or 70s could start to be activated. And in this case, in Morocco, we have launched, like an artist residency and cultural program. Mami, I would love to discuss this further with you later separately. And in Dakar, in Dakar, yes, Mami, we have a lot to talk about. In Dakar, we just started a project with a Senegalese colleague of mine, Mortada Gay, which is the study for the rehabilitation of the Dakar International Fair, the CSAS, thanks to the Getty Foundation. And so this is, again, an example to, instead of saying we need to change everything, in our cities, let's see what's there, what can be reused, and those are things that, again, can be done very quickly with not like a lot of, and to be able to answer the needs of the cities.
Are you planning to rehabilitate it?
Yes, it's with. I can tell you more about it. It's a grant. So me and my colleague applied with the Ministry of Commerce through a grant of the Getty Foundation that gives first money for the whole study for the rehabilitation, so the technical study, and in the second stage, seeding money for the rehabilitation. So we just started the process. I'll be super happy to discuss it more with you if you're interested.
For the history, I'm shocked because I heard that they already sold most of the land, and also I made a video clip there because I wanted to promote cultural activities in the CSS. And at the end of the clip, there was this sentence So to try to convince them to rehabilitate, and I didn't have this information. So best news.
Well,
Best news
Mami,
of the week.
we were just about to launch a, like a press release, because it took us a long time to get the government approval, et cetera, to make it official. But it's super exciting news, because why we applied for this grant is because they were planning to sell the land and then demolish it. So we did a huge lobbying, and it's a long story to be able to convince the Ministry of Commerce to apply with us, because the owner needed to apply for this Getty Foundation grant that was very competitive. If you look at the winners, there's like, kind of buildings by Le Corbusier and Mies. So this is incredible. I mean, that the whole CSS, which is a masterpiece, not known even by us Africans, it's history. And Mami, you'll be also surprised to hear that we received the 2 original architects, and we already brought one of them who had seen the place. Yes, he just was in the CSS a month ago. So anyways, sorry for this little parenthesis. But
no, it's okay. We're really sorry.
That's okay.
We will exchange contacts. Sorry,
Great. We love to see it. Okay, I just want to take this opportunity to say, if you're watching and you have a question, please do put it in the chat box. At the end of these discussions, we're going to take any questions you might have. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat box. And now we're going to talk to Kunle about new models of urbanization. I know that Inle Works is very passionate about innovation when it comes to architecture and doing things that are a little different. And I want to hear what you think are those new models that Africa can adopt and use in its dynamism.
Thank you, David.
Welcome.
I mean, we've like I began mentioning, a lot of our work has been focused on this point of intersection of issues of climate change and urbanization, and our approach to it has really been that instead of fighting the environment, we must learn to live with it. And what that meant is that we recognize the challenges of climate change, and one of the, like I mentioned, the most palpable, sea level rise, increase in rainfall, flooding, particularly in the coastal cities, which are the majority of the cities on the continent. So what that led us to is really rethinking what the city should look like in terms of its urban fabric. And I think a model that emerged, or that became very apparent for us to embrace, is what we call water cities. And it's simply just an approach, a different way of looking at a city where there's a lot more water in its urban fabric. And it's this sort of ecosystem of infrastructure, the built environment that's necessarily just about the entire ecology around environments that have a lot more water within the fabric. And what that says is that, of course, we know that a large part of the continent, of the world, is covered by water. And if we begin to rethink how we plan our cities, especially those around the waterfront, not creating barriers and dams and things that would constantly be fighting it, but really allowing water into the city fabric, I think there will be a much better coexistence between humanity and the environment, which I think is a big driver for us in our work. And with that is also an approach to think about the material culture of how we develop our cities. and developing solutions that rely primarily on materials that are available regionally, and also improving our processing system. So there are cities, there are communities. I mean, if you look at historically, I mean, there are great cities all over the continent. Which reminds me, I think Aziza and I met in Laayoune in Morocco a few years ago, and that's it's an incredible city also up north, and there are so many places like that all the way down south to on the continent where just the indigenous ways of building and developing cities or communities are still very reliable methods of scaling up to producing new forms of settlements, and but also just bringing in the relevant technologies to ensure that they are they're more efficient. So I think we're not really, we seem to know all of these answers. We talk about it a lot in these conferences and conversations. I think the challenge is that when push comes to shove, when you're about to make decisions about what you will build, there are so many other, let's say, drivers of development, factors that's really, weigh down on those decisions. And I would take responsibility. I would maybe challenge the designers and the architects and the planners on our team in this kind of discussion. That's one of those things is also our sort of personal self-interest and what we think is design. We think, design has to be of this form. It has to be about aesthetics. It has to look this way. It has to be crazy. It has to turn. It has to twist. And we get carried away by those issues as opposed to really tackling and learning from the environment, and looking at issues of demographics, the economy around what we're doing, the social politics, infrastructure, the environmental conditions and resources, and morphology. These are, so for us, the tenets that we use to analyze the urban dynamics of any project or any space that we work, and we try to solve the challenges. And the result is what we do with design is really just to orchestrate these issues. So it's not about, we're just looking at aesthetics. It's it's a natural outcome. So I think again, just to go back, it's really that the models of cities and urbanization and planning that would be relevant for the continent already exist in various forms. They exist in small fragments and insights. We just need to look, because there's a lot of intelligence on the continent. We need to look carefully. We need to look deeply. We need to look at what has worked for centuries, and we need to harness those opportunities and scale them up for the future development of the continent.
Thank you so much, Kunle. Thank you. And Mami, do you want to add something really briefly?
Yeah, really briefly. I'm just gonna talk about also the importance, of when you were talking about water, Kunle. It's another aspect of the water, but here in Senegal we have a problem with the littoralization, and we have a problem with the privatization of these natural areas, who are supposed to be complete for public use. So I think redefine the urbanization plan of this area could also contribute to optimize commercial and industrial dynamism. It could open the doors to new business and to new way of living that space. And I think it's really important. And also, I think it's really important to go and see the model that we used to have in the past in Africa, that are completely and directly relate to our culture. here in Senegal, we have what we call the concession lebu. They are like democratic concession, you know, like this. I don't know how to say it. Regrouped in, like on a like circle like this, and they have their own scheme of democracy, you know, for living space. And I think it's one of the most like ancient urban heritage of Senegal, and it's actually a model that could work. Today, it's still working, maybe in the rural places, but I think we need to find a good balance between rural and urban to see exactly what is suitable for us. And also a last example, it's on a book I started to read, and I saw you in the book Kunle. It's the about the sub-Saharan African cities. It has published by Germany. You know, like it's 7 volumes. You don't remember?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the 7.
It just came
the
out.
African
It just came out. It's a guide, the architecture
Yeah,
guide to
exactly.
sub-Saharan architecture. Yeah.
Exactly.
Written by
I forgot the
non-Africans.
title.
That's another story.
Yeah, written by
Yes, but
non-African. Yeah.
non-African.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
I saw
it's
that
our
point.
time.
Exactly. It's our time. And it's our duty to document too. But I saw just an interesting example. They were talking about master plan of Bamako that they have, and the strategy aims to regulate how agricultural communities can use photovoltaic systems to build a decentralized power network without having to finance costly overhead lines from the capital. And the plans envisage to the surrounding communities supplying themselves with water and electricity and delivering excess capacities to the capital. And I think it was really interesting. And they were also inspired by like other cities that are in other continents, but maybe are in the same kind of context. And I think it's a really interesting way to project ourselves in the future in this context where.
Okay, Mami just disappeared. We're going to move on now to talking about, you know, the high constraints of living costs and transport costs, the constraints of living costs and transport costs in Africa, and how we can overcome that. So bigger cities are becoming more and more expensive, and we're talking sustainability. At the same time, there is affordability of transport, of living in big cities. So how do we go about that? Okay, Mami is back.
Yeah, sorry.
Were you done?
Yeah, I was done. I was just
Okay.
going, to just like make une liaison avec la 4e question. But it's okay.
Okay, well, make that liaison because we're going to start with you. I actually wanted to start with you, so perfect. Go ahead and tell us how the high costs of transport and living conditions, how they can be overcome, and linking that to what you were saying earlier.
Okay. I wasn't really sure about that question. I didn't know if I had like the really like the good answer, but I tried. So many sub-Saharan cities face the threat of urban collapse, and the population is growing faster than electrification can be developed. The process of population concentration has not resulted in sufficient investment in urban infrastructure and other industrial and commercial structure, nor in an adequate supply of affordable housing. So with coordinated investment in infrastructure and residential and commercial structures, African cities will be able to increase agglomeration economies and bring people closer to jobs. Daily transport costs for those who work are high, even prohibitive, and informal minibus systems are far from economical. For those who are forced to work, access to employment is limited, and without sufficiently planned development, cities are experiencing a steady expansion of informal settlements, which tend to be located in the center and thus closer to the jobs. And I'm going to just end by citing Claudia Skibbe, who is an economist. And she said, African cities are expensive both for households and for business. Infrastructure such as roads, electricity, and water are highly economic. As a result, there is a little incentive for manufacturing firms to locate in African cities, as long as the industrial sector accounts for only 10% of the gross domestic product of sub-Saharan states. World market prices for raw materials and mineral resources will determine the economic future of the continent.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We're going to hear now from Aziza about the fourth question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sharing a last time with you because I want to answer with this slide. This is my hometown of Fez. It's the old city, which has the largest pedestrian network in the world. And I think there is a lot to learn from the urban fabric of the city of Fez, like what Mami has mentioned, to be able to create, areas where one, ideally, like distance, would, kind of in a way avoid having this very long commute times, etc. So I think we just need to rethink our relationship to the city, which was zoned where in a modernist way, with work in one area and then I'm living in another. And I think so. This is one thing, but obviously this cannot be possible. This pedestrian network, cannot be possible in all cities. So public transportation, ideally, as least polluting as possible, kind of would be the answer. And I think, kind of in the city of Fez, for example, which has the old city, which has the largest pedestrian network in the world. If you need something heavy, you would just hire. But this, enable the air quality in the Medina to be really, really great. And so, cars have been being brought in more and more inside the old city fabric, and we're involved in that first project that you had mentioned, where we actually turned many of these places that were taken away by cars back into public plazas. So, so I think to rethink how pedestrian systems and low impact public transportation can tie in different parts of the city would be really ideal and lower that cost.
Thank you, Aziza. Now, Kunle, like Aziza mentioned, having pedestrian networks might not necessarily work for many of our cities in Africa. So, what are other ways that you think the continent can overcome the transport costs and very high living conditions?
Yeah, I think Aziza has mentioned a few points that are very valuable. And maybe just to add to that, some of the strategies, of course, are based on planning and rezoning ideas that would allow areas that are a lot more mixed use and that provide places to live, work, and play, so that there's very limited movement within the region. So as cities tend to agglomerate, communities agglomerate, there's always that tendency for developing a CBD, central business district, which is where you have the aggregation of economies, and it's the most expensive real estate. But in a way that could be argued as an old model of how cities should develop. You probably want to have, as cities have become much larger and mega, you want to decentralize some of these services and keep that in mind. And government policies that would really that would be deliberate and intentional about making zones that are more diverse. So where they recognize that there's an area that is primarily residential or primarily work, and people are shifting. I mean, take Lagos, for instance. It's island, mainland, island. dynamic, and that in itself makes creates a unidirectional traffic flow. And I think as a city like that evolves, if there's a lot more intentionality about where you put commercial services, how you incentivize the development of, let's say, the business areas where it would normally not be, it would reduce the movement of people from one zone to another. And I think COVID has also given us insights into the actual real need for movement within cities, and hopefully we can learn from from that experience to reduce our need for transportation. So I think those are some of the approaches that I would say, just to add to what Aziza has mentioned and Mami. Have we lost
Deborah? Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Look, this is your page in the book, Kunle. I don't know if you're seeing.
Right. I haven't seen that. Okay.
Ah, you haven't seen yet. Okay.
Okay.
Really interesting.
Thank you.
I haven't received the.
I'll look out for it. Yeah, I'll look out for it.
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm really glad to meet you. I love your work, and I know both of you, of course. And I use many times your project in my presentation, Kunle. And I think I went to Morocco in 2018 for a Smart City Africa forum, 2016.
Yeah.
And I met someone named Fouad Akalai. You know him?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Course,
and
yes.
he gave me a magazine that I still have, and I think you have an article in the magazine. Something like that. Yeah,
because he's the editor. Yes. And
Exactly,
by the way, I was going to say, so Conley and I saw each other in Laayoune in this forum also.
Okay.
Organized by the foundation that I had worked with on that project for the the upgrade of urban spaces. So Conley, I'm so happy to see you again. But I just wanted to say something, Mami, is that in that book that you have, the entry, there's an entry on the CSS, and that entry is wrong. They have the wrong information. If you read it, they have the wrong information about. Yes?
Actually, I don't understand the master plan. They put it there.
It's wrong. A lot of information is wrong, and that's why it makes me feel very skeptical. There are several entries that are not correct, and that makes me very upset because every time there is a publication, like it looks
there's always something wrong,
and in actuality, it is not. Like it has a lot of errors.
So
we're gonna put it on Twitter.
I disappeared.
Yes.
Perks of being in Africa has to happen at least once or twice.
Yes.
So we had actually concluded with the questions that were discussed. I just had a final question that I would ask, for the people like me who want to know what their role is in understanding architecture better. So, for example, I want to build a house and I want to do it in the most affordable way. And so I go to an architect and I ignore everything he tells me to do and do what I want anyway, because that's what most people do when they're building houses or building infrastructures, because they want to spend the least amount of money that they can. So how can the ordinary person understand and appreciate architecture better, but not just architecture, but sustainability as well? And how can we as Africans include that in our mindset and in our thinking? Let's start with Mami.
Deborah, I have the answer for you, actually.
Oh, okay.
I'm facing this every day.
Go ahead.
Because I face this, because I feel so, this is so, for me, it's a struggle, right? But I think I found the solution. The solution is to actually demonstrate that you can, with less money than what they want to build. This is what we did for that social housing. either with the same amount of money or less, you're going to do something that at the end is better and going to make them spend less money. If you can demonstrate with a simple calculation that the amount of money wasted in air conditioning after 1 year or 2 years is going to be X, if you build this way, you're going to pay X minus 10 or 20. The economic argument in general always works. This is how, and little by little, I think our role is also as a psychologist, slowly educate the client, without being arrogant, to use the right argument. So I think this is a role that a lot of architects just give up because we're paid less and less money, so we don't have the time to do education as well. But anyways, that's my answer to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, okay. I agree with her. It's exactly that, and I think surtout our generation. excuse me. Our generation, we have this duty to promote, and to inform people about architecture. I launched this hashtag on Instagram named I promote Earth architecture, and I made a whole campaign for the whole week. I was informing people in caption about the material, about the quality of the material, and I realized that a lot of people didn't know at all about the material. So I think it's important for people to know, and it's important for the governments to use their public buildings to show the example to the rest of population, because public buildings are the most important buildings. They are the building where they spend the most money. They are exposed. People see them every day. People experience them. So I think it's a first step, to show and to let people have their idea on this way of building, on the way they feel when they're in this building, and also the economical aspect of this construction.
Thank you, Mami.
You're welcome.
Kunle, let's wrap up with you.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, there's just a lot of work that is still outstanding on the part of the architects. We have a responsibility to also understand what really value proposition is in in the built environment and in offering services to clients, right? And I think the challenge we have, we first of all do not focusing a lot on the things that are of importance and of value, and we're not able to then transfer those values to the potential clients or whoever we're collaborating with. So it's always an argument, because like I said earlier, a lot of architecture is mostly seen almost as a luxury to a development where you're simply, it's almost seen as an aesthetic addition over a practical need, right? I think the fundamental responsibility of an architect should not be about aesthetics. It really should be about giving value, solving problems, ensuring that there's efficiency, showing that there's an economic advantage, like Aziza mentioned, showing long-term benefits, showing the impacts that you're not only working for people, but you're also working for the greater good of the public and for the environment that you're working, and that there are, let's say, medium to long-term benefits that are not very clear to the people that you're offering. At the same time that you're not doing it, that it may be, yes, sometimes it may be a little bit more expensive because you've just thrown a nice marble floor over the thing or whatever it is that we're really interested in. But really that you're investing in a future that is a lot more, that the returns will be a lot longer. So I think the challenge is really, in my view, that architecture needs to be complete. The architects need to really understand the value that they're offering and focus on really solving challenges. And then the culture of having patrons. We have patrons of the arts in Africa now. We barely have any patron of architecture, so to speak. There must be some patronage. And when the culture has improved, where architecture culture has improved and value can be seen, then you begin to have patronage and these conversations become easier.
All right. Thank you so much, Kunle. Thanks to everyone for your contributions. I have a better understanding of the subject after this whole discussion. And honestly, I'm a little intrigued, and I think I'll be reading more on architecture and actually paying close attention to what goes on in that sphere. So people are watching, they don't have any questions, which I think is good. I think it means that, they heard us clearly. It wasn't in Greek or Chinese, it was very easy to understand, which is amazing. And if they want to reach out to you, you guys can share your social media handles if you want, or website, just in case you want to reach out to talk. So yeah, go ahead and do that. Oh, we have a question. Okay.
Can you tell Khadija too that she has to write in English?
Yeah, I'm gonna just quickly translate that, and we'll be fine. Okay, so the question is, what economic costs would be involved, or would it take? Would it take economically to try to adapt between urbanization, rampant demography, and the reduction of living spaces that we share with other species? And I would like to assume this is referring to animals. I believe so. Okay, so what are the costs? What would it take? What would it take? This is a literal translation, but what would it take to adapt between urbanization, the rapid population growth, and reducing the living spaces that we share with animals? So, who has an answer?
To answer this, I mean, it's not an answer, but it's just maybe a clarification. I think it's so hard; it's impossible to give an economic cost, But what actually I wanted to discuss with this question is, what is the economic value that we should be given to green spaces? Because this is really what's about, is that we're eating away the ecosystems of other species. And very often when we take out those spaces, I mean, the people that are the decision makers think, oh, it's just a void space, because there's no economic value. It's not like a commercial space, it's bringing money, it's creating jobs. But actually, there is a movement through academia and in many places that gives a cost to these parks, to these green spaces, and it's called ecological service. They are, kind of depolluting the air, creating better, in a way, of lifestyle and of living conditions, allowing bees to come in, etc. And I think this is something that in our cities we should give a value to a park. If decision makers said, oh, let's make a building here because this park is not bringing the city no money, no rent, nothing, not creating jobs, that's a wrong equation. Because the value on lifestyle, on the environment, on the ecological services it offers is very high. And we should try to compute that as we go ahead with the design of our cities.
Okay, thank you, Aziza.
I don't know if I answered the question.
I think, like you said, maybe we can't really give a direct answer to that question, but I hope that gave some clarification to the person who asked. Does anyone want to add anything? No? Kunle?
No, I think in view of time, yeah, that's a good response.
Okay. All right, that's fine. So I know that Kunle Adeyemi is on most social media platforms. So do you use that name on all social media platforms?
NLE Works is a I can type it in. NLE works.
Okay. NLE works for the company, and then Kone Adeyemi is your personal page. All right. And for Aziza?
Both. They're both semi work.
Right. Okay. Okay. Aziza?
So for me, it's just my name, last name, Aziza Shauni Project. Instagram at Aziza Shauni Project, and my website is Aziza Shauni Projects with an s.com.
Okay.
And
okay.
you can all send me messages. I'll be happy to answer.
All right. Mami?
So my Instagram page is Mamital. And for the live platform, you have the choice to follow Dakar Lives or Conakry Lives or Bamako Lives or Morocco Lives or Lomé Lives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank
you're
you.
welcome.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Share Africa, again for bringing me on board. I've thoroughly enjoyed this exchange, and thanks to our guests for also sticking to time. I appreciate that. So there is, okay, Kadisatu, we'll answer that question a little bit in the chat. Please do go ahead and answer in the chat. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Deborah Amuo, like I mentioned. And please do join us again as the forum continues tomorrow at 2 p.m. 12 GMT, and it's going to be a day from tomorrow consecrated to creativity. So we're going to take a look at African fashion, African music. There'll be a DJ set on Sunday from 2:30 GMT, 4:30, and then we'll also have a DJ, it'll be DJ Did that we'll have on Sunday. And for the francophones, demain à partir de 14h, nous aurons une journée 100% consacrée à la créativité à travers la mode africaine. Et dimanche, à partir de 16h30, nous aurons un DJ Did, qui fera un set à 14h30 GMT, 16h30. Donc voilà, à demain. We'll see you all tomorrow, and thank you so much for listening, for watching. Thanks to everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Nice.